Polyphony Digital dropped an update to GT7 that was always going to be epic. PSVR 2 was not simply coming to a few demonstration events in GT7, but the entire game was going to be playable. And while the internet was distracted watching their PSVR 2 tracking numbers, Polyphony Digital slipped in some mint vintage cars, a track that has been requested by fans forever, and this. Sophy AI is a big deal, but if you aren't in the loop, you might be wondering why. Racing games have always had AI. Why are GT fans so excited about some different computer-controlled cars? And more importantly, does Sophy AI live up to its own hype? Let's find out. In order to understand why Sophy AI is making headlines, we're going to need to contrast it to the OG GT AI. The reputation of Gran Turismo's AI isn't so great, and it's because of this. This is Tsukuba with a nice stock Integra Type R. The AI is set to the highest difficulty and, as you can see, it's a bit rubbish. Driving assists are flashing all over the place, its inputs are jerky, and even worse, it never even seems to go full throttle. In the same car on the same track, it's all too easy to leave the AI behind in your dust. And it's not just that the AI drives poorly, it also pities you. Remember this time as the AI crosses the line. The replay cuts a little short, but let's call it a 112 flat lap time that the AI is able to achieve. Now this time we are letting the AI get way ahead. You would think that the AI being AI would just repeat what it did the first time, but it doesn't. Watch the speed here. The AI is sandbagging, going as slow as it can while still giving the impression of trying. It's a liar, and by the end of the race it's almost 10 seconds a lap slower, doing high 121s. Where the traditional AI starts out slow and only gets slower, Sophy AI is brutal and shows absolutely no mercy. While bottled up behind me, Sophy is already annihilating the OG AI, matching the 108.5 I did. And remember, the OG AI only managed a 112, but when you let Sophy storm off into the distance, she is doing a crushing 107 flat. You can see why GT fans can't replace the traditional AI fast enough. The OG AI contrasted with Sophy is stark. Sophy slides in, allows the car to settle, and powers out. The OG AI doesn't know what it's doing. It's on the brakes, then on the power, then back on the brakes. Completely useless. We know Sophy has the speed, but what about the racecraft? The OG AI isn't terrible, just a little oblivious. Apart from being slow everywhere, the AI will just often try to take the line it wants, not always realizing where you are. Is Sophy any better? Yes and no. Sophy will absolutely hit you, no doubts about that. But the hits are usually when Sophy has committed to ascend and can't do much to avoid you. Take this hit. It looks like Sophy just drove into me, but if I watch the replay from the AI's perspective, I just beamed myself into that position after the AI had already got its slide on and was heading for that part of the track anyway. It's the kind of contact that happens every day in the daily races. Interestingly, Sophy does seem to try to avoid you when she can. In this example, I got a little sideways and Sophy had to slam on the brakes to avoid me, losing time. I'm sure the OG AI would have driven straight through me. Sophy quickly makes back the time, of course, and as we go side by side into this heavy braking zone, Sophy gets a little hot, gets a little out of shape, and I think this is the first time I've ever seen Sophy make a mistake under pressure. It's not all roses though. Sophy still doesn't know what to do with a slipstream, deciding to back off rather than to pass, just before Mr. Human here makes creative use of the guardrail. PD really need to implement better penalties for these challenges. And although Sophy does wheel-to-wheel combat cleanly enough, there's some clear work to be done. Here is a classic AI test where you just park up on a corner and see what happens. The OG AI negotiates my Integra no problems. I can change locations and still they trundle past. It's only when I come at them backwards that the crashes happen, and even then, the first couple of cars still manage to miss me. Sophy, on the other hand, it's like I'm invisible. They just plow straight into me. Change the location, no change in the result. I mean, come on, that guy only had to move a few centimeters. In the head-to-head, still nothing changes. Overall, Sophy is just a major win, and mad props to whoever over at PD selected that rip-off Knight Rider music for Sophy. Chef's kiss. Sophy isn't perfect though, and I don't know if it's even plausible to have Sophy replace the AI throughout the game. Maybe the processing power required to run a full grid of Sophy AI just isn't there. Whatever happens, I applaud PD and Sony AI for leading the charge in creating real-world racing AI. The time for racing mindless drones has passed. I for one welcome our new AI overlords.